And I think this is also the first time we have a weather sealed Viltrox lens. Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto and I'm a photographer, and this morning I'm gonna take a photo walk here in Brickfields, Kuala Lumpur. And I have with me the brand new Viltrox 75mm f1.2 lens. But I have a minor problem. I don't have a camera body for this lens because I didn't bring my Fuji camera on this trip. But let me see if I can find someone, a Fuji shooter nearby. Maybe I can borrow a Fuji camera, and I think I can see someone who looks like a Fuji shooter. Let's go and ask him if I can borrow his camera. Hey, you have a Fuji camera. Could I by any chance borrow your camera so I can use my brand new lens? Would it be possible?
Excuse me, do I know you?
No, you don't know me, but I thought, you know, people here in KL are very friendly. And I thought maybe...
Hey. So you want to borrow my Fuji?
Yeah. I want to borrow your camera so I can try my new lens. Would it be possible?
What? Yes, it will be possible. What a coincidence, I have another camera just for you.
Oh, wow. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Most welcome.
People here in Kuala Lumpur are so incredibly friendly. And now I have a camera body for my brand new Viltrox 75mm f1.2 Pro lens. But I have to say a disclaimer. This is actually, I did not buy this lens. Viltrox sent out this lens to me for review purposes, and I get to keep the lens. I don't have to return it, so now you know it. But this is not a paid advertisement by any means. This is just a photo walk with this lens, and whatever I'm going to say is my own opinion and not a paid advertisement. A short telephoto like this is a little bit strange focal length or angle of view to me. It's usually in my photography only for portraits, but now I'm doing my best to find some angles and shot for this telephoto lens. And of course, people are so friendly here. I hopefully managed to get some portraits too. This is the very first Viltrox Pro lens, and it is more than just 3 letters written on the side of the lens. This lens has manual focus, autofocus switch, and the aperture ring is now much more better than on any of the previous Viltrox lenses. It has third of stop clicks, and it feels so much nicer than the other Viltrox aperture rings. And the aperture ring has been one of my standard complaints when it comes to Viltrox lenses. And this is also weather sealed, and I think this is also the first time we have a weather sealed Viltrox lens. The mount has a seal, and it has some seals and gaskets in other places too. So it is really truly a pro lens, at least when it comes to weather sealing. First thing I noticed with the autofocus is that it's not super fast. But then again, many of these fast prime lenses are not super fast focusing lenses, but it seems very adequate and fast enough for most of the stuff that I'm shooting today, at least. This photo walk, of course, I cannot properly assess the sharpness and optical qualities of this lens because when you see the pictures, I haven't seen them yet on a big screen. make sure to check out my comments after the photo walk towards the end of this video, because I found out some interesting things when I was looking at the photos from this lens on my laptop screen. In my opinion, this lens looks like a very smart move from Viltrox, and I hope to see more pro-grade lenses from Viltrox in the future. And the price seems to be very competitive, about $549 US, which to me seems very, very reasonable for lens like this, 75mm f1.2 weather sealed and all that. I have to comment the autofocus one more time. It really is not the fastest, but then again, this is a portrait lens, I think, and if you shoot portraits, post portraits, I don't think the autofocus is going to be any kind of a problem. But for street shooting or action, I would not recommend this lens. This is also not the smallest or lightest lens. The filter thread is 77mm and it's not exactly lightweight either. But then again, what do you expect? It's a 75mm f1.2. If you want something tiny, lightweight and compact, get another lens. Oh yes, the camera that I managed to borrow from that stranger who was actually my good friend Azul is the Fuji X-T3. So it's not the latest X-T5 or 40 megapixels or something like that, but I think it's good enough for this photo walk and good enough for my first impressions or initial impressions with this new Viltrox 75mm f1.2 lens. If I shoot through this foliage, I can definitely see some flare and reflections in the picture. I guess it depends on what you shoot. If you shoot portraits, it's definitely not a deal breaker, but if you shoot something else, it can be a deal breaker in some situations, just to let you know. Judging by the camera screen, the bokeh looks really smooth and creamy and all that. Of course, it might look a little bit different on a big screen, and it's easier to see some like flaws on a big screen. But so far I like it, and I like the smoothness that I get with the wide open f1.2 aperture. I mentioned earlier that this is not the most compact and lightweight lens, and indeed it feels a little bit nose heavy with this X-T3 without any extra grips. So for extended periods of shooting with this lens, I would definitely recommend some sort of extra grip for your Fuji camera body. Unless you have one of those bigger camera bodies, they might feel a little bit better without any extra grip. Alright, here I am in my apartment, and here are some interesting things that I found out after I took a proper look at the photos from this lens on my laptop screen. First of all, this lens is incredibly sharp. It has to be one of the sharpest lenses available for Fuji cameras at the moment. Also, there is almost no longitudinal chromatic aberrations, also called bokeh fringing. And that is remarkable because most fast lenses like this suffer from low to some extent. And that's also one of the reasons why those out of focus bokeh areas look so clean and smooth, because there are no distracting purple or green halos around those bokeh balls. Earlier in this video I mentioned something about the flare, but I don't think it's going to be any major problem in most of your pictures if you use this lens. And most fast lenses suffer from flare or ghosting to some extent because the lens elements are so huge and they collect huge amounts of light. But with this lens, I don't think it's going to be any serious real world problem. I also cannot see any distortions, but I suspect there is some sort of software correction, in-camera correction going on, but that doesn't matter to me, at least, as long as the image quality doesn't suffer from those corrections. However, no product or no lens is perfect. This lens has a couple of more or less serious flaws, and one is focus shift. There is a very clear focus shift. The focus plane moves further away from the camera when you stop down the lens. In these examples it's a little bit extreme because I'm at minimum focusing distance and the depth of field is very shallow, as you can see. If your subject is a little bit further away, the depth of field might cover the focus shift to some extent, but nonetheless it can be a problem, and it depends on how your camera focuses. If your camera focuses at wide open aperture but then stops down for the actual picture, then it can be a problem. But if your camera focuses at the stop down aperture, then it should not be any major problem. So it depends on your camera. And there's also another focus related downside. It is the autofocus, which is on the slow side, and it can be sometimes unreliable, especially if you shoot at stop down apertures. Now I don't know if that is related to the focus shift problem, or maybe it's related to the Fuji camera that I have, I don't know. At some point this lens will also be available for the Sony E-mount, for Sony APS-C cameras, and maybe the autofocus action is better on Sony, I don't know. It's also possible that Viltrox can come up with a firmware that can improve the focus action, but as it is at the moment, and based on my experience with this X-T3 camera body, I cannot recommend this lens for anything other than static subjects like portraits, landscapes and so on. So it looks like Viltrox has done a really good job regarding sharpness and bokeh fringing, and you can get some really nice and clean looking pictures on this lens. The autofocus is a minor disappointment, and so is the focus shift. So I'm left with the mixed feelings after shooting with this lens. Earlier in this video I said Viltrox sent this lens out to me for review and I get to keep this lens, but as a matter of fact I'm not going to keep this lens. I'm going to give this lens to my friend Azul, but I'm not giving this lens away because it's a bad lens. It's just that I don't need a short telephoto, fast telephoto lens like this, and Azul has much more use for this lens. So that's what I'm gonna do. I hope this video was helpful and I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please consider buying me a cup of coffee. There's a link down below if you don't live in Finland. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.